Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's On Aging conversation. My name is Barbara McMillan, Provincial Community Engagement Coordinator for United Way of British Columbia's Healthy Aging team, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional ancestral territories of all First Nations in this land we now call Canada, on which we gratefully work and gather. The On Aging Conversation series is a collaboration between Healthy Aging Core and Help Age Canada. If you missed earlier episodes, you'll find them on Apple Podcasts and on Healthy Aging Core Canada, the national knowledge hub connecting agencies that support and advance independent living for older Canadians. You'll also find the fall lineup of On Aging speakers on Core, as well as delivered to your inbox if you signed up for the twice monthly Core e-news, which you can do at the bottom of the Core Canada homepage. In our work with CORE, Help Age, and the extraordinary network of community-based senior serving agencies, volunteers, and professionals, we're really privileged to encounter many thought leaders and innovators in the field of healthy aging. And so On Aging Conversations was launched to help bring some of these ideas, innovations, and perspectives to a wider audience. Each episode includes a short video that highlights a community-based organization that's making a difference in the lives of older Canadians, followed by Help Age Canada CEO Gregor Snedden in conversation with our featured guest, and a little time for a few questions before we wrap up. And that's it, a 30-minute dose of healthy aging information and inspiration every 2 weeks. Meanwhile, please feel free to introduce yourself and post questions in the chat box. And now I'll turn it over to Gregor Snedden, CEO of Help Age Canada, your host for On Aging.
Thank you, Barb, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here again today, and I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Vanessa Sparks of the Toronto Public Library, who will introduce and have a chat with shortly. Help Age Canada, for those of you who don't know us, we support community-based initiatives through partnerships across Canada and abroad to improve the lives of older persons and their communities. And it's a real pleasure to work with Barb and Core Canada and Healthy Aging BC and as well. But I'd like to start, as Barb suggested, with a short video of one of our community partners, a community-based senior services organization. This is Library Month, National Library Month. So we're going to be featuring today the Atwater Library in Montreal, a really cool organization that, in fact, Vanessa is familiar with as well. And they offer a really cool digital literacy program that we've had the privilege of working with them on. So we're going to share a little video with you from them now. Take it away, Gemma.
I'm Liz Perrin. I'm the Connect Project Coordinator at the Atwater Library. In short, that's designing, delivering digital and media literacy curriculum to the community for free. So the Atwater Library in Westmount, Quebec has been a part of the community, serving the community, is a learning institution for over 100 years. It's got a long history, of course, being a library, but also as a mechanics institute, so an adult learning institution. Long history of delivering digital and media literacy in a lot of different formats. We got a computer center open to the public. We have courses that people can pay for to refresh or get skills for, let's say, employment. But then also, and especially more recently, with private funders and from the government and from Help Age Canada, we're able to deliver a lot more to people and, I suppose, underrepresented groups of people. So older adults, low income, language minorities in Quebec, which is a really big challenge here. So every day, I'm helping or speaking to somebody in some capacity about, programming they can take advantage of, a specific thing they might want to try to conquer with their device. One-on-one sessions too, I think, are a big part of it, because they get to build a relationship with the volunteer. And that's one thing we did try to do, is pair a volunteer with a person, and wherever possible, try to maintain that consistency and let the two of them work out a personal relationship, a schedule, forms of communicating that they prefer. And that's been really great. And from a lot of the feedback, because I do check in a lot with the participants and the volunteers, each of them from both sort of sides, they're very happy about getting to know each other, and they recognize that there's no milestone or magic marker of like, okay, now you get it and now we're done. There's a lot of feedback from volunteers saying that, well, what happens after? Do I get to still talk to them? Or can we help them afterwards? So, and I'm hearing that too a bit from the participants. So something really meaningful is happening, which is encouraging them to power through challenges, you know, the internal talk, all of that kind of stuff. And so certainly the one-on-one and the meaningful relationship with the volunteers is a really big part of it, I think.
Well, that was great. We're so proud and privileged to work with the Atwater Library. They just do such amazing work right there in downtown Montreal, and just showing some real innovations and the creativity and flexibility and strength and presence of a library in a local community, serving all people and all kinds of programs specifically for older Canadians, which is really amazing. So today we're really privileged, this being the Canadian Library Month, to welcome with us from Toronto Public Library, Vanessa Sparks. And Vanessa, who comes from the Chateauguay Valley, actually, and even is familiar with the Atwater Library, has a really interesting background, both in library and archives, but also an MSW. So what a great combination to in her current work. And so really thrilled to welcome you for a chat today, Vanessa. Welcome.
It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to Hope Age for hosting me. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat.
No problem.
I'll just grab this sip of water, but I loved that video.
Yeah, well, and so Vanessa and I we're chatting recently, and just sort of came up that she actually has spent quite a bit of time there at the Atwater Library. You spent some time in Montreal. What do you recollect of the Atwater Library?
Well, I mean, the Atwater Library, for one thing, actually, my mom volunteered there after her retirement up until before the pandemic. So we have kind of a personal connection there too. But I'm from Quebec and from the Chateauguay Valley, but I lived in Montreal for many years until 2016. And the Atwater Library is, I mean, I think I've described it as a beacon, kind of. It's a beautiful building. It's really inclusive. It sits in front of Cabot Square, which is a really interesting space in Montreal. And they do such amazing programming. Like that was I absolutely loved that video. I love the focus on digital literacy for older folks, but it's just, they do so many things at the Atwater Library. I'm gushing, but for good reason. Like it's just an amazing place. And what a delight that I get to be part of this conversation with that video preceding it, because it's really amazing. Yeah.
So now a background in library and archives and an MSW, and now you're with the Toronto Public Library. I mean, can you just how did you arrive? Just very, kind of briefly, what was that route?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, I guess. So I started out in library and archives. I did my degree in 2000. I graduated in 2008. And I worked at Library and Archives for a few years, and I realized that I did want a sort of more of a connection with people. So I was working in archives and I didn't really get to deal with the public that much. And so I ended up in community mental health for some reason. And I started working a lot with older people, doing programming, lots of digital literacy, lots of teaching computer skills and that kind of thing. And then when I moved to Toronto, I decided to do my MSW and kind of formalize that orientation. But I wanted to be able to connect public libraries and my work in social work and in the community as well. And so I just kept on, trying to make connections with libraries. And after I completed my MSW, I worked at CanAge, which is a great organization. So I did that. And now I'm in this position, which is kind of, it's kind of a combination of both those things. Like I bring my social work skills and the
cool. Very
librarianship.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, you know, libraries, as we all know, I mean, they're just a part of every, or just about every community with so many different roles. And it's just a natural place, especially, you know, for older people. You know, maybe we can talk a little bit about isolation and loneliness later on, but as a you know, a free space for so much opportunity. And Toronto Public Library is really, you know, on the cutting edge of really providing amazing and creative programming in Toronto, the GTA. I think you said there's like 100 branches. That's amazing. Like what, just for fun, like what, like how many people do they see, and what are the numbers of older people that you're serving there in Toronto? Do you have any of that kind of?
I do, yes. So yeah, Toronto Public Library is the busiest public library system in the world. It has 100 branches. Some of them are really big. If you've been, you know, if you're not from Toronto and you've never been here, but you're planning a visit, I mean, it's really worth coming to the Toronto Reference Library. It's an incredible building, a beautiful piece of architecture. And we have over 1 million cardholders. So I think it's 1.2 million. We don't always break down our numbers for older adult cardholders, but there was a survey done for the Toronto Senior Strategy a couple of years ago, and I think it's somewhere between 60 and 70%. I'll try and find the actual number. I did look it up. I think it's 63% use the library on a regular basis.
Of all older people in Toronto.
Of all older people in Toronto.
Wow,
so it's a really important piece of social infrastructure because it's a space that's free, that's beautiful, that's provides warmth in the winter, that provides cool environment when it gets really hot, and it's inclusive to everybody. You know, everybody can come to the public library for free. So it's a really, I think it's, you know, I'm sorry that I'm throwing out a book recommendation so early, but I'm just gonna do it, Gregor. Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinenberg. It really talks about social infrastructure and the importance of public libraries and other institutions as well. But they're unique. They're a powerful and unique institution. So please cut me off if I'm babbling too much. I just love.
It's interesting. Just as you were speaking there, just made me reflect. You know, some of the things we've talked about before, particularly from you know, an intergenerational perspective of locations or mediums where the entire community can gather. You know, one of the things in our Canadian culture is, as religious institutions like churches and mosques and synagogues, as their attendance, you know, as they become less and less, you know, a regular part of people's Canadians' lives, it's kind of was one of the last places where all generations would meet and gather. And it's interesting now that maybe the library is really moving into that space, and yet it's around books where fewer and fewer people are using books and more technology. But it's kind of really interesting.
Well, that's an interesting thing about libraries is that, yes, they are about books and we have an incredible collection of physical items, but we have an incredible digital collection as well. And we have programs. You know, if you happen to be in Toronto, you can come and see Carrie, directed by Brian De Palma, tonight at the Toronto Reference Library. You know, we have film screenings, we have author readings, we have musical performances. Like it's really, it's a community hub. So yeah.
It's so cool. Well, tell us a little bit, like, what are some of the crazy stuff you guys are up to there in the GTA?
Okay, well,
like you're like, tell us about the community librarians. That's something that I think is like really interesting. And I think, tell us about that.
Yes. Okay. So this is a really, really interesting project. So community librarians are librarians that work off-site, so not in a library. They'll work at some other kind of agency. And Toronto Public Libraries had community librarians in lots of different kinds of settings over the years. But this year we got funding from Toronto City Council permanent funding for community librarians in Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation buildings. So if you're not in Toronto, that's sort of, so it's the biggest social housing provider in Canada, I believe. And so we got funding from them, and then we got funding from an anonymous donor. And I'm just going to look this up because I wrote it down. I'm sorry. Richard and Joan Boxer, and some other donors as well. So right now we have 4 community librarians working in Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation buildings. And what they do, they work there 5 days a week, 4 days a week, sorry, and then they have an admin day. And they provide seniors digital literacy training on site. They also do equipment distribution. So part of the donation covers equipment, laptops, and we also have a Wi-Fi hotspot lending program at the library. And so that's used in this community librarian program as well. And they deliver a curriculum that was developed and piloted a couple of years ago in 2019 as part of the library's commitment to Toronto Senior Strategy. And something that's really interesting about community librarianship, and I think about digital literacy in general, I'm sure that you can speak to this in your experience at HelpAge as well, and definitely reflected in that video from Atwater Library, is that digital literacy is about increasing digital inclusion and digital access and digital literacy skills, but it's also about that social connectedness and social inclusion and fighting loneliness and fighting social isolation. So that's kind of the role of community librarians as well, which I think is really nice. They offer a service that is in class form, so people can get to know each other. But they also offer book a librarian appointments, which gives you one-on-one attention with a librarian if you need to work through something in particular. And they do things, they can help a resident, say, fill out a government form or navigate a website or troubleshoot a device or things like that. And so far the feedback and the outcomes from that program have been really positive. Yeah, it's just incredible. It's a big project, and it's lots of work, and lots of amazing people are doing incredible work on it. But it's going really well.
And did that kind of emerge out of the pandemic? Like you had programs. How did you guys adjust in the pandemic? Like, what was the library's response, or how did you, particularly around older people, what was the response?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the community librarian program actually was it was kind of in the works before the pandemic. So it was in relation to our commitment to the Toronto Senior Strategy. So we'd always planned to do that. But of course, doing digital literacy and building people's skills is just a part of the library's work. So we've been doing that for a long time. During the pandemic, of course, digital literacy for older people really got spotlighted for lots and lots and lots of different agencies, and TPL did respond in many ways. So one of those ways was setting up Seniors Tech Help, which was a free phone service that offered one-on-one tech support, essentially. And that started in January 2021. It had funding and dedicated staff until March, but it actually kept on going on until August. And now, if you go to the TPL website, you're like, where's Seniors Tech Help? It still exists, it's still there, but we've actually just rolled it into our core service so that if that Book a Librarian program that I was talking about before, sorry, it's not a program, it's a service. The Book a Librarian service now offers Seniors Tech Help. So if you make an appointment to go see a librarian, they will help you with all of your tech questions.
Is that available to anybody, or do you have to live?
It's available to anybody. Yeah.
So someone from Barb in Vancouver could call.
I mean, you should be a library. You should be a library, a TPL.
Okay. All right.
But
so
during the pandemic, actually, a good something that did happen was people who didn't necessarily come into the library, you could get a digital access card. So that means you had access to all of the digital collections, but we do serve the Toronto population. So.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Barb. You got excited there.
Yeah.
Now tell me, so and now there's other programs. You guys have your digital literacy, of course, which is amazing, and that tech hotline is great. That's a program that we've also dabbled in and worked with, which has its own sets of challenges, as I'm sure you guys discovered. What are some other programs for older people that you facilitate there at the TPO?
Okay, so we do have a lot. I'll just mention also that during the pandemic, just touching on isolation, during the pandemic, we also had staff that were checking in on all of our customers 70 plus. So they would do these wellness calls. So I just wanted to mention that because it's kind of, you might not think that a library would necessarily do that, but we made thousands of phone calls over the pandemic to all of our customers. Over
just staff would or
staff, yeah, so dedicated staff, and just calling to check in, say hello, and then be able to provide any kind of like information. And we also did vaccine reminder calls and called all of the members of our home library service. So the community librarians is kind of an example of, I would say, like something called, it's a library without walls. And the home library service is also a great service. A lot of older people use it, but it's really for anybody who can't leave their home for 3 months or more. They can access this service, and they can have library materials delivered to their home. So
this just made me, just makes me think, like, gosh, you'd have to have, I guess, I mean, maybe it is already included, but some type of particular training if they're making all of these calls in the pandemic, like emergency response. What do they do if this person they detect is, really depressed? I mean, they must have had some kind of training, or they sense some kind of emergency, or that's a pretty, just calling people. It's not like you just hand out phone numbers. I mean, you would have had to train your staff too.
There was a training, I believe. I'm sorry that I can't give you all the details on that because I don't know them, but if anybody has questions about that, I can find out the answer because I'm a librarian and accessing information is part of my role.
Awesome. Okay, but that is truly an amazing service. Like really, that really is amazing that the library would be making calls. I mean, for a lot of older people, that may be the only call that they got.
And there was feedback like that was like, it's just nice to have somebody call and check in and say hello. And I'm sure that there was also, experiences. I don't know if anyone here watching this or listening to this has done those kinds of phone calls, but sometimes people are like, yeah, I'm fine. And then you don't really have much of a conversation, but it can be really meaningful as well. So I think that's
Well, speaking of that, social isolation and loneliness. I mean, you as as an MSW and in your work, like, do you have any examples or experiences of some impact story or something about how you witnessed or saw or experienced some feedback from your programs or a program that?
Yeah, so I'm new to this position. I've only been at the library for 6 months, but I can say that in the community librarian program, we were presenting on it earlier this week, and my colleague, Nan Davies, shared this story of somebody who participated in the community librarian program at Toronto Seniors Housing, and at the end of it said that they had never met their neighbors before. This was the first time that they knew the names and got to know people in their building. And they left that program, the Seniors Digital Literacy Program, with names and phone numbers and friends. And so I think that really emphasizes how there's the skill building aspect of digital literacy and bringing library services into a building, but it's also really about that social inclusion and social connectedness as well, because that's so meaningful.
Now there's also like volunteer opportunities for older people, right? Like, can older people in the community volunteer to participate in?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways that people can volunteer at the library. So we have this really great program. I did it when I first moved to Toronto, called Leading to Reading. And it's a volunteer program where the volunteer gets paired with a child who's experiencing literacy difficulties or literacy barriers in some way. and they meet with them and help them learn how to read, and they develop like a learning plan together and take notes and do activities. It's a great chance to connect. And there's also a version of that program that serves adults with literacy challenges as well, because a lot of adults experience literacy challenges. And so that happens at branches all over the city, both for kids and for adults. And it's a really wonderful program. I've been in it, and it's very rewarding. High recommend.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. And how about from an intergenerational perspective? That's something always we think about is finding opportunities and ways in a culture, in a society where we just seem so I don't want to be too dramatic, not divided, but there's just so less and less opportunity for older people and younger generations to connect and engage in a meaningful way. Like,
it's true.
Do you see the library facilitating?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I'm shamelessly plugging this Carrie screening tonight. Maybe it's just because I really love Carrie and Brian De Palma. But the library, again, I'm sorry that I'm harping on this, but the library really is this amazing piece of social infrastructure where people from all ages, all walks of life can interact with each other. And that movie screening isn't designed, to attract older people, but I'll be there, and I can tell you there's going to be older people there. And so there's going to be lots of generations mixing. The leading to reading is certainly because it's attractive to sort of older people, say who are retired and who want to do a volunteer position, and then they end up working with kids and having that intergenerational contact. We've had intergenerational digital literacy programs in the past as well. That's something that we're looking at getting going again, where a teen volunteer is paired with an older person in a sort of staff-led program. So that's another way as well. But I think something that I'd really like to, this library space is open. The digital space, the physical space, it's open, and we work hard to make sure that it's welcoming and inclusive, and that when there are barriers, whether it's a vulnerability, due to low income or language or anything like that, we work hard to try and remove those barriers and provide the supports for people to be able to access the programs and services at the library. We're not perfect, obviously, but we do work hard at it. So yeah.
I would imagine the amount of shushing is much less than you might think.
Yes, you're perpetuating a librarian stereotype, Gregor.
Oh, it's terrible. Sorry, it's just terrible. I know. I just couldn't resist. It just popped up there. But I think I also just wanted to also make a plug, though, that you guys are also engaging in developing a will program, right? Which I think is really important for all generations to do.
It's true. Right? I should have mentioned that. So we do that every November. It's called the Make a Will program. We do that with the Ontario Bar Association. We have lots of great partners at the library. I wish I could list them all. And we have those programs coming up in November. It's really important it's important for older people to learn about the importance of wills, estates, power of attorneys, but it's important for people of all ages too. So yeah, great program. It'll be on the website.
Well, thanks, Vanessa. Just really appreciate your time today. We're out of time, unfortunately. We never seem to be able to get through what we do have, but go ahead, over to you, Barb.
Great. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And thanks, Gregor. That was so interesting. And, the wheels are spinning and turning. And I just keep thinking, wow, does my local library have anything like this? So, one of the questions I would ask is, how you share across the country or throughout the province, with other libraries. But since we don't have time for you to answer that, what I would love to offer, though, is if we could write up your programs and feature them on Core Canada. We do these spotlights on community programs, on provincial programs, etc. So we would love to follow up with you if that's okay, and be able to highlight that, because it's definitely great ideas worth sharing. Love the concept of community librarians and libraries without walls. Really terrific. So
delightful.
Thank you so much. And just remind everyone to go to Core Canada, healthyagingcore.ca for recording. You can pass it along to other folks who didn't get to join today. And please join us next time, October 27th, when Raza Mirza is going to be talking about the Canada Home Share program. Same time, same place, and hope to see everybody then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much
everyone.
for having me.
A real pleasure. Thanks. See you all on the 27th.